Right.
that don't need paperwork, that can be, digitally signed, and then,
Yes, the first thing is to validate that they're needed and when they're needed. And the second is the best way of using and getting them into a workflow so that it isn't flying around by paper. And the first one is validating that it's still a necessity. Or if it's a necessity, what are the limits on that?
so somebody can look at the purchasing policy to see the necessity.
The whole thing. The whole thing starts with the processes and policies, and works its way through. I mean, I have in my inbox a draft interim change to the procurement policies to take into account things that we can do before we go live with something. But I think it will evolve too. I think one is that we're changing everybody's job there as well, and as they get better used to what is available to us and what's the best practice, which we're getting a lot of help on that, then we'll be more comfortable in making those advances. But this is, again, it's an area that this university must do better. Must do better. Yes.
Hold on just a minute.
Sorry, with the new payroll system integration, have you really taken a hard look, lessons learned from the initial PeopleSoft integration at the Rutgers legacy Rutgers end, so that we don't incur those kind of issues with the new system and waste a lot of valuable resources on that end, and really take a hard look at what we did wrong then and not worry about customization and putting out costs initially for customizing stuff because they were needed, but then end up paying the money on the back end or resources because we didn't customize.
My answer is yes, but so yes, those scars are still quite helpful in terms of avoiding some of those. That said, this is not where we're fixing things. And the reason is that we really have to concentrate on getting the payroll right here, and then fix things, but from one base. So phase 2 is HR. And in fact, phase 2 is HR, and phase 3 is payroll, such that we don't try to do too much, and we focus, when we get the payroll, focus on just payroll. So the yes, but try to avoid some of those key things that will come, but we're really not, unless it is just such an obvious fix that we can make, we're not changing because we can't have so many things moving at one time. We really have to focus on all those employees into the system and take care of it, and for the cost distribution we want that. And so I'm trying to focus everybody on the goals, the specific goals, and then we fix it. Get to one place first. That was good. We spent a lot of time on page 7. Very good. Timeline. Some of this talked about through, and by the way, all this stuff is available, will be available this afternoon on my website, finance.rutgers.edu, as well as all the past versions of this, and ultimately this lovely recording will be linked through there. So we're right here. We are aiming towards these stars right here. That's July 1. We've got the general ledger implementation, grants management. We've got another one here called monthly close. And that one's lined up at the same place. So what is that? If you're in, if you RBHS, you're used to a monthly close. Close the books every month, do standard transfers, standard transactions, and so on. Rutgers never closes books, except at year. And that was another, like, say that again? because I've been at 5 institutions, and it's the first one that never closed its books. And I don't know why, and I don't want to know why. But the point is that we need to have consistent closes such that we can have comparable months from year to year to year. And we can also take stock of things in the middle of the year. We need to run quarterly financial statements. We really do. We actually need to run monthly ones, and we'll get there. But this is where we learned a lot from the RBHS crew in terms of what are the practices to close the books, and how would those transfer into what will be the old Oracle system for 6 months, and then flowing into the new system, which will be one system. So, kind of aligning Oracle and Banner for the 6 months. So, for most people, you won't even know. For some of you, it'll require, I guess, more standardization about when you do certain things, and how we close the books, and we need to get basically down to a five working day close. This is going to be piloted starting in January on Legacy Rutgers. There'll be some key offices that will be working with Steve DePaulo's office to try it out and just get used to what needs to happen there. There's a system that supports this from kind of a traffic cop point of view. But it's a big deal for Legacy Rutgers to do this. So this is one where we're shifting, the orientation of doing such that on July 1, it's consistent across the board. Yes, sir.
So in order for this to be effective and to work well, every other cog in that wheel has to work in a timely fashion.
That's right.
There's no good to close out a book on a month, 5 days after the month, if we still haven't gotten the charges from a grant account that hasn't been set up because it's 3 months behind in that
Exactly
process.
right.
And it can't get set up until legal passes the non-disclosure and everything else that went with it. So if we're 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months, which we have been trying to get the grant account established, and we're sticking the people that are doing the work on this grant on everything else to try and move them to an account that's been closed 5 months ago, how do we deal with that situation?
Well, that's one of the reasons research came first as the business process, and why we have to get from an average of 35 days average. We've got the experience of the rent down to 5 to 7, which isn't even best practice. That's just normal practice, such that kind of thing doesn't happen. We also have to, in that process, look at what happens on I don't know what they're called here, but there are pre-expenditure accounts in other places where the accounts got set up in anticipation of the award, and so therefore you didn't have to do a whole lot of transactions after you set up the award. So that's another thing that's in policy and process of reworking that. You're absolutely right, and am I going to say that ain't going to happen? Well, it will happen. We've got to reduce the regularity of it. And you've got to ask all the pieces along the way, well, why are you holding it? Or why are you touching it? I mean, all these things come down to touches, reducing the number of touches. But I'll also say, in some cases, it's the agency. It isn't us. And then we have to just say, well, what's a legitimate workaround, like a pre-expenditure account that you can deal with until such time as the agency catches up.
And what about the things outside of our control? I purchase a brand new instrument, the PO is issued in July, the instrument arrives in September, we take possession of it in December after it's gone through all its whatever, and we don't actually okay to pay until the following, January or so. How do we rectify that with that PO that was issued 5.5 months ago at that point in time?
Well, it will have been encumbered before
But
then.
let's suppose it fails and they're sending half the money back. Where does it go at that point in time against that closed account? We just carry it forward? Is that an issue?
You've hit a level of transactional granularity
Okay.
that's gone beyond me, but if you wouldn't mind conveying that issue to Seppi over here, so that we can insert that scenario into the queue, I'd like to find an answer for it, because I know that happens, and it's not because of us.
Right, exactly.
So if you, right here, Seppi, and if you just give her that scenario, I'd like to make sure that somebody's thinking about that.
Mike, we have a question.
Thank you.
Hi. Ooh, that's really loud. So we're part of the responsibility center, so we're scheduled to be budgeting in the spring. And so we're trying to outline the process now, get everything ready. We just want to know, as far as the monthly closes go, are we going to have the ability to book accruals and deferrals and things like that so that we can budget accordingly?
Yes, yes. I mean, that's the key piece. Some are, the first are the required accruals, are the ones that you would accrue with any kind of closing. The other are the discretionary ones, which are helpful from the management point of view. So, and I think that's one of the reasons that Steve is running some pilots, so that get used to that. And again, this is something that every other institution does. I mean, I remember at Duke in the 80s, when we just had a list. These are all the journal entries that we expect every month, and we closed in 5 days, and that was with ancient technology. This is just something that we have to get disciplined to do. What was the standard close? Yeah. I mean, this is normal. So it's just a matter of these are the transactions, when they're due, how you get them in the system, and what to do if you didn't, to account for it. Now, some cases, you got things that land in the next month, but you can change the dating in the system such that it looked like it was, Questions have been great. I don't need to do the rest if you keep on questions. So this is the general schedule. So you see that BPR implementation. This is reorganizing the controller's office so that it lines up with this and lines up with these processes. These are what I call the nice to do projects if we have capacity. They'll be done eventually, but they don't require to be done by July 1. Things like accounts receivable for other than grants. We don't have a central accounts receivable service for departments or units now. That would be a nice thing to have. We have to have it for grants. We have it already for students and for patient billings, but other things that would be helpful. Fixed assets we'll have to do. Cash management and treasury will do as capacity permits. The budget planning I talked about. This magic date is for the responsibility centers when will be open. And that date is because of 2 reasons. One is we do all the work for the central services and get those cost allocations in. But it's also just after we hear from Governor Christie's budget address of what we expect our appropriations to be. So before then, it's kind of, before we know what he's proposing, there's not a whole lot of point to doing too much budget planning because it'll fundamentally change the revenues if there's a cut. Or, hey, maybe we'll get more money from the state, and then we'll have a great cut budgeted. But that's the timing there. So this is not because of the system. This is because that's probably the standard timing we'll be seeing going forward. And then there's about a 2-month period of time where budgeting will be working, and it depends on which campus you're on or which unit you're with, and then that'll be within the chancellors working with the deans and directors of how they do reviews and all that. And the center, I'm staying out of that. But that'll happen with the vice chancellors for each of the 4 major units and working with the chancellors. And then when we hit, where is it? Somewhere around here, we'll take a first consolidated look. And then we wait. We test it and we do stuff, and then we wait for the legislature. to do its thing. But the guts of all the budgets will be in the system, so that if it stays as we expected with appropriations, then as soon as the Board of Governors approves the budget in July, we can turn it on. You know, we don't have to wait 3 months or however long to populate the general ledger with the budget information. Expense management, travel management, this is the RBHS migration to PeopleSoft. And the ERA things come along here. You need to put ESERT on here because that's right in here too. Or here. The conflict of interest, IRB, RAP space 2. See down here at the very bottom, student DPR org review. I talked about enrollment management early, and it's enrollment management, registration, financial aid, student accounts. So it's a big lift there. That's looking at all the processes, all the policies regarding admissions or transfers, graduate, undergraduate, professional, all those things, and saying where do they belong? Where do they belong vis-a-vis the central university or the 4 major operating units, the New Brunswick, Newark, RBHS, and Camden. That's a lot of work. It looks like it's ending in February. That's just the end of the beginning, because then comes more work and more effort there. We're not actually going to be touching the student system until probably start working on it 3 years from now. And that's because that's the area that we need most business process and policy work. Again, it's focused on that line in the strategic plan, improve the student experience. And we desperately need a unified student information system, probably more than anything else we need to do. But we need to do more work ahead of the system itself. And we won't, in fact, select the system probably until a year from now, and let the vendors keep getting better along the way. So phase 2 I talked about is really going to concentrate on HCM, which is the HR product. And so you first do a full organizational review and business process review for HR and payroll. The whole gamut, from applying to really retiring or leaving and thereafter. So it's like procure to pay, but for people. And so there'll be a few little projects early for this, but it's really this is work that is still to be defined as Vivian Fernandez and her group works with the HR officers on the 4 major units and then within schools and departments to what is the best thing to do where and how. Again, lots of policy work, lots of detail in terms of process here, where do things belong, where there are opportunities for shared services or where there are opportunities for improved service, and then start working on the system. So no precise dates yet because that other work needs to happen first. We know what the system will be. It's actually 2 generations past our current PeopleSoft system, but in the cloud, an Oracle product called HCM, Human Capital Management, which is a terrible term, by the way. And we're not going to use that here other than to refer to it as a module. And then you see way out here, payroll. And this was a tactical decision I mentioned before to separate the HR implementation from the payroll implementation. And you can do that. We can run the old payroll, PeopleSoft payroll, using the front end of the new HR system, and then concentrate on the new payroll component and really, go down to that same thing I said before on the migration, every paycheck getting it right. and getting all the processes and such correct. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. For the payroll implementation in 2017, just a request, could you slap on effort reporting and certification in that also?
You don't have to remind me of that, okay?
But the other question I have, it might sound like a foolish question.
No, but actually by then we want to understand the best way to do that using these systems. So because most effort certification is driven in payroll systems, and it's less that way here. But most institutions drive it directly out of payroll, and we do it directly from position management. So one thing we can add on that helps certification is position management. And then the effort distribution is translated into the cost distribution.
I mean, from guidance, it's asking you to do that if it's available. Right now it's not. By that time, you should be thinking about that type of, the integration with the same payroll system.
Well, there's no question, that's a requirement.
Yeah. But the other question I have, might sound like a foolish question, but with regards to the next year, July implementation, are all the RBHS units going to be part of this transition? Are they, every single one of them?
Yes, there will be nothing but one Rutgers system.
Robert
And
Morgan,
it-
Rutgers Medical,
everything.
AHC,
Everything. There's only one corporation here. And it isn't, I have to emphasize, we're not moving, other than the PeopleSoft, we're not moving RBHS to current Rutgers things. We are creating a new system for everybody. So re-implementation. And so all those lessons learned are feeding into, whether it be the REOS or PeopleSoft, all that's feeding into, avoiding those. I want to make no mistakes. I don't want to make over. There's not going to be anything but one system for these things going forward. That's why it's so important to move the payroll now. Because I don't want to wait until that piece to be on. Even if it's an imperfect system, I want to be on one. There.
So for RBHS employees, there's a 1 or 2 week pullback of pay. Will that change?
There has been a negotiated mechanism there. I can't off the top of my head tell you how exactly it's going to be done. I will get that answer. Now, if Vivian were here, she could, I just don't have it perfectly in my head.
So,
I know it's been done, something's been negotiated, I just don't.
Okay.
I'm not going to recite it.
you're missing 2 systems on your chart. That's part of the lived experience of some of the people in the room. One is the new recruiting and onboarding system in HR, talent management, which went live last July. And the other is the move to Office 365.
I didn't miss it on my chart, I haven't gotten to it yet.
Okay. Well, Office 365 is going live this summer,
Right.
presumably, and the other one went live. But my question relates to the tremendous amount of change
Mm-hmm.
in the organization that all this represents. Change that's badly needed, been needed. It's wonderful to see. But when I think about the staff in my school, we're thinking about huge amounts of training that have to take place between today and July 1 and then through the next few years. So I guess it's a request for project teams, and I know there are people in this room who are on various project teams, to think about not just systems, but giving advice to all of us to think about how much time we're going to need to devote, have staff devote to training.
So I don't have
That's going to
to,
be a huge impact.
I don't have
on
to
all
tell
of us.
anybody that because that's a first and foremost for every piece here. So either every implementation partner that we have has change management up front. Because you're exactly right. When we're changing everybody's world, we have to move that along. There's this wonderful picture called, that's referred to as the Valley of Despair. And that is, I wish I had a graphic, but this is where you are now, and the change happens, and you go down here in the Valley of Despair, and the whole question is, how do you work the path up? And I don't use that as to be flipped. It's an important concept to think about. Everybody will get down here before they get up here, and the question is getting how high and how fast. And so we have a change management expert who's starting work for us on Monday, who will be dedicated to working with the implementers and the project teams for a consistent path to help people through that, for each of these changes. And the change will differ from group to group. Like I said before, if you're currently on SciQuest, you're not going to see much change. You're going to see improvement, but not fundamental change. If you're in Rutgers now, the HR payroll isn't going to change until later. So we're really trying to limit the change here in a way that, and then focus on the training and the change management components. And I'm talking about multimodal training. We need both training and then we need reinforcement. Like what happens the second day, or what happens the second week, so that there's support for that. Again, these are lessons that have been learned by me and by John and by others for years, and
Right, but I'm actually also talking about, so going into the PeopleSoft implementation, it was never said to us, you may need to think about adding people to your business office. You may need to think about 6 months of overtime. You might want to hire a temp. There were things that if going into it we had thought through better about the impact to the work time would have been helpful.
well, because I don't think you're going to need that much. You're going to need a lot of training. But we're not moving you to a new system. We're moving you to a system that is currently functioning for 2/3 of the university. So these are established. If we were bringing up that thing, I'm with you, okay? If we were converting both of them to that, we're not. We're bringing up that we have the established ways of doing this, which we need to train on, but they've already been analyzed to say that they are not significantly different from what is necessary to run into Banner, because these are not different systems. In fact, when it comes to timekeeping, it'll be dramatically better. So that has been thought of and why this is sequenced the way it is. Now, that said, it's still a lot of change. That said, it's still a lot of training. And it's a lot of hand-holding. And that's part of the project management office, the support there, and then that's in every project there. So, and the reality is these days, the statistics are very clear that if you start training somebody a month at a time, you wasted your time. You need to train them just before it goes live. That doesn't mean you don't communicate with them everything that's going, what you're expecting to see and so on. And that's going to start pretty much after the beginning of the year, where we'll start to feed out information. But, the days of starting training in March for July 1 are gone, because it's useless. It's been found to be consistently useless. One of the things that we had most effective at Yeshiva, for instance, was we would run regular brown bag lunch workshops after we went live. So we just set up on each campus a place that somebody could bring their work. We'd have active machines, and experts would be in the room and help them through it. That's the kind of hands-on thing we're going to need. And we'll do it. That sounds inefficient. It actually is very efficient, because a lot of people have the same problems and they all come there. Yes, ma'am.
So I echo Karen's sentiments about training, but one of the recommendations that I would have for it earlier on, even if the on-time training is what you're moving forward with, is some sort of initial introduction to the downstream impact of each of the business process changes.
Yeah.
A lot of people in the units work on
Absolutely.
When we're talking to central officers about it, it's sort of lost in communication. Because
Absolutely
there's
agree.
not that broad understanding.
That's why we're bringing in a change management expert who, who knows about those stages that we have to get through. And that we do it consistent across different implementation partners. You're absolutely right. I mean, introduction and information on this. We're admittedly behind on communications. Okay, we've been trying to hire a communications officer. It's been hard to do. We've been trying to get web stuff together so that we can start to push things out. We're behind on that. So we're going to have to catch up very quickly on that.
And I think that with us staffing our offices and making sure the right people are sort of assigned to the right areas of the system and whatnot, having that broad understanding would be helpful.
Yeah. There's going to be a lot of stuff about that during the winter. And it won't be like this. It'll be much more, much more campus-based or.
The next couple of slides sort of talk through the engagement process that we have gone through. So some of the early communications that we've had and some of the areas that we are engaging people for participation in the projects. So some of that stuff is kind of where we are now. We have reached out to each of the units and asked for participation so that they can participate at a couple of levels. One at a business advisory group, and the other were on individual project teams, somebody who has expertise, so that as we're going through some of the initial design sessions, as we're going through some of the initial core team training, people will get a better sense and they can take some information back to their units.
So this is where you mix those. You have subject matter experts in the same group with the individuals in the unit who are responsible for that activity, and therefore can talk, well, this is who we have to do this, and translate that into, how does it change, and then repeat, continue and repeat.
Yeah, my only comment there is that it can be stuck in a siloed approach still, so that you get sort of that conversation specific to whichever group someone happens to be assigned to in the unit, but you lose that broad perspective of, well, what I'm doing here actually impacts this other piece of the system, and I should be mindful of that, or something somebody's doing before it even gets to my piece of the system impacts me in some way. So
Yeah, and that's part of the purpose of this pyramid, is that you're right, things from here need to feed into this broader based representative unit that kind of checks that point. Now, it's not going to be perfect, but that's again why we're hiring a change management expert, somebody who does this for a living, to say, okay, what are the right steps to make this work best? And as I said, we're a little behind in communications and introduction to this stuff, but we'll catch up. This is just how the teams work. I don't need to really spend a lot of time there. Each project has a champion, a project manager, this business advisor group, and then these are more detailed about the school unit representatives and where the technical elements come into play. Again, all this is available if you need to take a look at it, interested. I think the key here is that these project structures are ones that are best practice right now. We didn't make them up. They came to us from the people who have been successfully implementing these systems, and they've been advising us this is the best practice that we do right now, not just the way that John and I did it at the last place. Yeah.
You mentioned closing the books on a monthly basis. I wonder if we're past the point of consideration of 28-day period basis as opposed to monthly basis.
Okay, so you hit on something that that's been one of my interests in, that is a fiscal month. And this is third university past Duke. So Duke forever had fiscal months. So same number of days in every fiscal month except for June and July. And you can do a 5-4-4 in terms of weeks, or 4-5-4 every quarter, so it would be consistent year in and year out. And so I like that idea. It meant that every month would close on the same day, Sunday. We'd have till Friday. It wouldn't change by the calendar. Your accruals would be simple. Because on a bi-weekly payroll, you either have no accrual or you have 1 week. The idea isn't dead here, but it is, I admit, I a lot of pushback because of the idea of transitioning to that. And it may be that this is something that I pick back up 3 years from now. And the reason is clear because a fiscal month allows for complete comparability year to year, as well as easier accruals. Now, accruals are not nearly as complicated as they were back in the 80s and 90s. So one of the reasons Duke did that was to make the accruals simple. Now they're pretty straightforward. The payroll accruals on that, and even the other accruals are pretty much on that. But the change in the calendar does do things. But the other side of it is, saying to somebody that, even though you're in February, that's not going to happen. Even though you're in September, you're actually in fiscal October. That's stupid. Okay.
I'm just thinking if everyone's not closing.
Yeah, it's more complicated. Because if you do a 5-week, 4-week, 4-week, or 4-5-4, or whatever, then the alignment with the real month gets.
I just thought since not everyone's closing their books out on a monthly basis, this is going to be something new. It's a prime opportunity to introduce it.
Yeah.
Starting them on a month and then eventually changing to something that works a little better.
Yeah, I want to at least half the resistance. Get everybody on a month, and then maybe introduce the idea down the line. I mean, there are good reasons for it from seasonality analytics, being able to do that. It doesn't matter as much for education as it does for research and clinical care. That you really plug in more seasonality that gets down to weeks that matters more. But maybe in the future. Other questions? This has been a great discussion. Thank you. This also feeds into lots of things we'll take back and make sure we have in the queue. I didn't get to RCM. If you're interested in that, I'll stick around a few more minutes and talk about it. The big thing about RCM is, well, first of all, it's here. So, what happened? All the way to the bottom left. No, now we got to okay, something wrong with it. The key I wanted to talk about RCM was, I referenced part of it when I talked about the budget timetable. So the budget timetable is oriented towards that new budget law. So I think that's pretty clear. The other thing is that there were, besides, we put it together quickly. It worked, but there are things to make better. One is automating the cost allocation. Because right now they exist on this massive spreadsheet in the budget office. And there's all sorts of risks about spreadsheet issues, although Vincent's a master at this. But it also is not terribly transparent. It runs, even if you know the spreadsheet, you have to go to 5 places to see it. So what we've done is run a project where we've automated that. It's in a single system where you put in the inputs, you put in the statistics, and then you see the whole path. You see the path from the cost center down to the responsibility center. And the reporting is very good on that. So it's also something that if you want to try multiple, if you want to change the model, try something different, if you want to try a head count rather than FTE, you can change the statistic and rerun it. If you had to do that in the spreadsheet, it would take, it took only a day, which was amazing last year. I doubt it took a week. But that's one big thing, because that'll make it a lot more transparent into the allocations. The other big thing is that there were a number of issues that were put in the parking lot, I call it. And those are things that we just didn't have time to get to or required more effort. There's a list that I thought I had on there, but of what those are, but I can talk about them. And these are coming out of the chancellors in the steering committee. How do you organize enrollment management? I talked about that before. What's central versus local? And local meaning either at a university basis, like New Brunswick, or at a school. And that includes the financial aid, that includes the registrar functions, all that. But it's really more around, as much as anything, around the admissions functions, whether it be undergraduate, graduate, professional. That's one. Two is IT. Again, what is local? What should be central? We support it. And here we've got another example of local can mean a campus, or local can mean individual schools. You've seen the announcement of a new Chief Information Officer, Michelle Noren, who will start December 1st. She's fantastic. She's coming from the University of Arizona. She's done this kind of thing before. We'll jump on that issue along with critical issues on these projects, as well as research computing and instructional technology. So that's two. Development. And the structure of the foundation, and as it works, again, with campuses and the schools. That's one that came up recently. Now I'm not cheat sheet on. HR. I mentioned the HR org review and BPR, that and payroll. HR and payroll go together. That means really taking a hard look at what belongs at what level of this newly reorganized university. And how's the best information flow and process flow there. So HR payroll is a big one. There was some minor issues around research administration, notwithstanding the reforms that are going on to that project there. There's still some organizational things to deal with in terms of the four major units, and those will be studied. In terms of how the administration functions work, I think the reorganizations that we're doing address those issues. And then the last were libraries. Again, something that is both has a system component and a local component. And so there's a academic leader, chancellor level type of group that's working with the new university librarian personality to look at that. Then there are the gory details. And all the gory details will be worked interactively during the budget cycle. In terms of updated statistics, updated space, the new space management system that's coming on board that will give you a lot more information, but you'll need to tell us a lot more about how the space is being used. What am I missing without my notes? I think that those are the big ones. So those are things that they may happen to be taught by the time the budget gets done. They may have placeholders in the upcoming fiscal 17 budget and then come back to it. The key here is that the model is never done. There's always improvements, and there's always fixes, and there's always organizational changes that impact it. So we did pretty darn good for as fast as we went. And, you know, as Nancy Winterbauer said, the sun came up in the morning and instruction happened and research happened and patients got seen and people got paid and, you know, those things came along. But doesn't mean that we don't still have a lot of improvement to do there, and we do. But what it is doing is changing the conversations at the academic leadership level, which is what's the important thing. It's taking into account programs with full costs and full understanding of what was previously, whether you were in Rutgers or UMD&J, were black boxes. And now, whether you agree with the attribution or not, we can account for all those overheads that existed. And we ascribe the revenues to the right places. So it's changed the conversation, mostly for the better. A lot of gory details to deal with in these key issues in the parking lot. But I'm thankful for everybody's cooperation and jumping into it. Not that the president gave us any choice. Always come back and say, I would have liked another year, but he had more votes. And I did, not going forward with it. And I'm also glad we're not going live with it when we're going live with this, even though this supports that better, because that'd be too much stuff. You'd be partly out there. Yeah. That was an hour-long talk in 5 minutes. So, any questions on that? I'll stick around for a bit. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. I hope this was helpful. Again, the slides will be available online this afternoon, finance.rutgers.edu.